and Forum for Equity in Health and Barefoot Academy of Governance. Forum for Equity in Health quickly is a collective of co-learners from diverse backgrounds that emerged from the second GovernH workshop conducted by the Barefoot Academy of Governance at Sitilingi in March of 2024. And our attempt was to continue the dialogue process, share learnings, and try and convert the study and reflection into action. We have been meeting Abhay for the last 2 sessions at least, but for those who have joined us for the first time today, Abhay is a public health physician working on community and public health issues in Maharashtra for the last 3 decades. We hope that Indira Chakravarti will be able to join us in a while. She's having some issues with her laptop. But just a quick introduction, she is a public health researcher and guest faculty at the public health program at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University in Delhi. And she has written several times on issues such as vaccination, assisted reproductive technologies, corporatization and commercialization of healthcare, and social determinants of health. So hopefully she will be able to join us and share her insights. A quick reminder that these sessions are meant to be interactive, and we welcome your questions and encourage respectful and constructive debate and dialogue in a non-hierarchical space. Indira has joined just in time.
Okay.
In the last 2 sessions, we have discussed the concept of a healthcare ecosystem, the social embeddedness and systematic alienation of healthcare in India, financialization and commodification of healthcare. And today we hope to discuss the links between financialization and digitization and how digitization has possibly enabled this financialization. So thank you for joining us, Indira. I've just done a quick introduction, and without taking any more time, I'll hand it over to Abhay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just before you start, sorry, if any questions, as your question occurs to you, please enter it into the chat. I will be keeping track and sharing it with Abhay and Indira, and previous recordings also. The link the YouTube link I can share in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gayatri, for introducing us and giving the background. And yeah, it's good that Indira had joined. So she will be adding substantially to whatever I'm going to say. I apologize in advance for the somewhat heavy content of this session. And I really don't know, maybe someone better than me would have simplified it. But I have tried my best to at least present the main point. So what we can do is we can stop after a few slides and have a little clarification, and then maybe go ahead if it feels a bit heavy. And I think, but the previous 2 sessions were quite they were quite fruitful from my point of view, because I was able to put together some key ideas about financialization of healthcare, its linkages with corporatization of healthcare, and its overall impacts on the healthcare system and the healthcare ecosystem. So today we'll be talking about a very crucial linkage between financialization and digitalization. Gayatri, it's digitalization, not digitization. I'll be coming to that very soon. There's a difference between the 2 words. So digitalization, which is, of course, financialization and digitalization in the larger economy are continuously going on, and in the Indian economy also. And as part of that, what is happening in the health sector is of great concern for health professionals, public health professionals, health activists also. So therefore, we need to, probably look at these in a little more detail. So just a second. Okay, so I hope you can see this. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I'll make a distinction between 2 terms which they sound quite similar, but they're not the same. So that is digitization and digitalization. And I'll give brief definitions of both. So digitization is a technology. It's a technology which converts information into digital format, and which can, of course, be used in so many different ways once it is converted into a digital format. So when you scan a set of photos and on your phone, or take photos on your phone, and then you share them with somebody else, you have digitized that information. When we send emails, when we send text messages, when we forward videos or whatever, we're making use of this technology. And this is a very useful technology. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's useful in various aspects of life, and it's also very useful potentially in the healthcare sector. So whatever critical comments I am going to be making are not about digitization as a technology per se. I'd like to first of all emphasize this. But digitization is not the same as digitalization. And digitalization refers to the use that is made of this data. How this data is used, controlled, and I would even say in some cases manipulated or centralized for various social and economic processes. So the digital technologies per se are, in a sense, they are technologies like any other technology which can be either used for a positive social purpose or maybe misused. So starting with the use of fire to the use of explosives, to the use of nuclear energy, and so many other, there will be so many other examples of technologies which can be either properly used or misused. So the same to an extent is true of digital technologies. The use of this for various social economic processes is digitalization. And for example, in the corporate sector, in the business sector, making or receiving payments through digital channels. Every day, we probably make payments through GPay or UPI platforms. That's an example of digitalization. Or in case of the government, this may include creating of digital records and identities, the way in which our Aadhaar cards have been linked to a whole other range of platforms, and then providing of services and entitlements may be linked to these digital channels and gateways, and making digital payment of wages, welfare transfers, etc., etc. So how digital technology is used in a particular society, in a particular context, that is digitalization. And the critique that I'll be presenting is of digitalization, not of the use of digital technologies per se, which in a certain sense may be regarded as something which is kind of neutral and which can be either properly used or misused depending on the context. So yeah, this is just a reiteration of the same point. And it's a digitalization is the use of digital technology in specific forms, which is shaped by the dominant political and economic regime. And in the present world, this is dominated by finance, capital, and financialization. And so it is actually kind of pretty obvious and natural to understand that digitalization in the current present day world is the use of this digital technology, which is heavily shaped by the way in which the entire economy has been financialized, which we have already discussed in the previous two sessions. So there's no surprise that digitalization is very strongly shaped by financialization, and it also supports financialization, as we have already discussed. So if we say that financialization, as we've discussed already, is how do we assess financialization? It's about the depth, the access, and the efficiency of financial markets and institutions. So what is the kind of role that is being played by financial markets and by financial institutions, which are playing an increasingly influential role, a very powerful role, shaping the economy. So this is financialization. And digitalization, if you want to measure it, it can be measured in terms of the levels of digital connectivity, the use of internet, e-business, e-commerce, and also e-government, and how various economic processes and also governance processes have been enabled or facilitated through the use of digital technologies. So if we look at these two kinds of parallel but integrated processes, there are very major and deep linkages overall between the emergence of digitalization and the development of financial markets and institutions. And financial markets are not the same as financial institutions, as we know, but they are, of course, closely related to each other. And digital transformation in the business and public sector, this basically accelerates the functioning of financial markets. And e-commerce and e-government, these are the two key aspects of digitalization. E-commerce in the business sector and e-government as far as the state is concerned. They have a long-term enabling influence on financial markets and financial institutions. So e-commerce enables financial markets and e-government enables financial institutions in various ways. So therefore, there is a strong and very systematic linkage between financialization and digitalization in general. Right now, we are not talking only about the health sector, but the overall economy and the global economy. And here, one more new term, which I'll you probably know this term, it's fintech. Fintech is short for financial technology. So fintech is actually a fusion of financialization and digitalization. These are new technologies or often innovative technologies, which are applied to develop the financial industry. I'm not going into all the details because I myself do not know very much about them, and it would be a lot of details would emerge there. But as you can see in this diagram, there are a whole range of technologies which are developed as part of fintech, which enable, these are digital technologies which develop and support the financial industry and financialization. Now, how does digitalization support and enable financialization? First of all, data itself has become an asset. Now, this is something relatively new. 30 years back, probably that kind of large-scale data did not exist, and it definitely was not treated as a major asset. But today, businesses and also governments, they regularly collect, analyze, and also even monetize vast amounts of data. And somebody who controls large data sets has a huge advantage. So for example, Google or Facebook, these firms which control and basically continuously assimilate data, they know how people think, how people behave, what people prefer, what kind of products, what kind of websites, what kind of entertainment, what kind of personal linkages, even political preferences that people engage in. They harvest this huge amounts of data. So data itself has become a major financial asset. This is one, important, which also has implications for healthcare, as I'll come to. The second linkage is the way in which trading takes place in the era of financialization. So maybe 100 years back or 50 years back, trading was about, somebody is selling a product or a good or a service and somebody else is buying it, and there's an exchange of money. And that's where the matter used to end. But now trading has become something highly automated, and there is algorithmic trading, and there are robo-advisors. So now trading does not involve necessarily always human beings taking the decisions about what to buy and what to sell. There are sophisticated computerized algorithms and robos which continuously, engage in very rapid and, automated kind of trading, buying and selling of various kinds of financial assets, stocks and shares, various kinds of speculation. And this leads to a lot of volatility, and it prioritizes short-term gains, which are linked with financialization. And as we know, that is a problem in itself. So this algorithmic trading and automated trading is also a linkage between financialization and digitalization. Third is digital platforms. And digital platforms have become major players in financial markets, since today, many of these companies, the newer non-banking finance companies, they are heavily dependent on digital platforms. They may have a very sparse physical presence, unlike a bank, which you can go to, walk up to, put in your cash, withdraw cash, deal with a human being. Unlike these, many times these financial companies, these non-banking financial institutions, they are mostly operate in the cloud and through digital platforms. And this also leads to financialization of everyday activities. And it penetrates into our daily life, how we make payments, how we take loans, how we use credit cards, and so on. These all, are linked with the digital platforms and financial services. And what are now the adverse impacts of this linkage? So the first is that because digitalization and financialization, they are closely integrated, these industries, these industries, they dominate the market, and a small number of firms and individuals who are operating in this market, through fintech and through the integration of digitalization and financialization, they start extracting very large profits, which do not trickle down to or do not really benefit the vast majority of the population. And these digital platforms, while they extract huge amounts of profit, the employment that they do create some employment, but usually that is quite precarious, and it's not really leading to income equality. Rather, it actually increases income inequalities. So there are a small number of companies and corporates who benefit from this entire process. And this financialized and digitalized these processes in the economy, they detach financial markets from the real economy. So it assumes a life of its own. It assumes a dynamic of its own. And here you're not producing anything. You're just trading. You're just buying and selling. It may be stocks, it may be other financial products, it may be securities. And these are continuously traded on a very speculative basis. And surprisingly, large amounts of money are made out of this. But it disconnects from the actual economy of production and consumption. It's not concerned about what are people able to afford, or what are people buying or not being able to purchase, what is being produced, whether that is enough for the people's needs or not. All these factors go completely into the background. Now, a manufacturing capitalist needs to at least engage with the larger social market, because they want to sell a product which at least somebody will buy. So they need to have some linkage with the larger, social reality, and at least to the extent that it shapes their market. But the financialized companies, they can completely disconnect, or to a large extent disconnect themselves from the real economy. And this has a whole range of adverse consequences, because this contributes to financial bubbles and instability and even crashes, as we saw in 2008. Surveillance and control of data, because the crux of understanding digitalization is who controls the data. This is the core. It's also very important in the health sector, and it's important in general. Those who control the data, those who have the complete ownership of this data, they have the capacity to make other actors behave in ways which they find profitable. So digitalization has enabled surveillance. Now, you would have heard about Pegasus technology and so on, but whole range of surveillance takes place in the private sector also. There is something called business surveillance. And of course, the government also engages in this kind of surveillance. And on one level, you probably know about that, how before major elections, some of these platforms like Facebook and so on, they have been actually exploited to both understand and manipulate people's political preferences in some countries. And these tech companies can also commodify your personal information, often without our consent, and also enforce certain kinds of regulations which prioritize financial stability over social welfare. So data exploitation and surveillance and control of personal data is also a very important feature of this combination of digitalization and financialization. And finally, concentration of power. This is actually very critical, and it has political consequences also. It's not just at the level of the economy. And what we are seeing today in countries like India and also many other countries of the world, that power, both economic power and political power, are getting more and more concentrated. A small number of extremely large and powerful corporates and certain parties which have take upon it themselves the role of controlling society through various means. Their interests completely merge with each other. as we have discussed earlier also, whether we want to call it corporate Raj or we use some other term for it, like authoritarian corporatization. So digitalization and financialization, they contribute to this concentration of power. And tech monopolies, because there are certain monopolies, like Amazon is a kind of a semi-monopoly. Google is also a certain kind of monopoly. I mean, it's not exactly a monopoly, but you know what I'm trying to say. These huge tech companies, they start wielding a huge amount of social and economic power in different ways. And they influence market structures, and they also can then start shaping political policy to their advantage. And this concentration of power leads to regulatory capture. So the government is now finds it very difficult to regulate these huge corporates and these huge monopolies. And so in fact, rather than the government controlling the corporates start controlling the government. Or the corporates start regulating the government. And this leads to a whole range of problems in limiting democratic oversight. And so actually we may be, think that we're living in a democracy, but major aspects of policy are actually lie outside the purview of what governments are able to effectively control. And these digital and financial systems are rigged in favor of the elites who wield more and more power. And now let's come to the health sector. But before that, I think maybe we can, if required, we can take a short break for any clarifications if there's something which these are a bit complex concepts, but I think that at least you can get a sense of what is going on. Maybe each and every term and each and every sentence may take some time to absorb, but broadly, the broader linkage between digitalization and financialization in the economy as a whole, which has emerged especially over the last roughly two to 3 decades, especially over the last, and this is accelerated since the 2008 financial crash, which actually exemplified the instability, the volatility, and the detachment of the financial economy from the real economy, and led to a whole range of adverse consequences across the world. So maybe if there are any specific comments or clarifications, and maybe Indra, in case you want to add anything at this stage also, you're welcome. Okay, there's one question about the Aadhaar number. We'll come to that very soon. We'll be talking about the Aadhaar card and the Aadhaar number and Aadhaar registrations as a major issue in digitalization of healthcare. So we'll come to that. And Mike, you have given some comments, which of course I fully agree with. It's more of a comment than a question. The challenge is, how do we democratize work, and how do we also democratize institutions which control work and which shape the way in which we all work, either in the public system or in the private sector. So if a doctor is working in a private hospital or in a public hospital or a health institution, how do we democratize work? It's so. But what your overall
that could be the
observation?
subject of a session like this. Maybe that could be a subject.
Yeah, sure. So probably we need a separate discussion on that. So Gayatri/Kranti, could you please explain a little more about how financial markets are disconnected from the real economy? Okay. So I think the 2008 financial crash is probably the biggest and most striking example of this. But there are smaller examples also which go on all the time. So you imagine that there is a company which earns its entire profits and huge profits just by buying and selling financial assets. Okay. So they are not interested in what is being produced. They don't have any factories. They're not producing any services. They're not running a hospital or anything, but they are just controlling financial assets on a very large scale. Now, this company comes into India, as I had described in the previous session, and buys up some corporate hospitals or acquires a majority stake in certain corporate hospitals, let us say Fortis or Max or Apollo. And now they have only one objective, and it's very, very clear. And it's driven by algorithms, it's driven by stock market values and so on, that the profit has to be maximized at any cost. That is how they survive. That is how they expand. Now they look at this hospital. They are not concerned about this hospital. Yeah, which area is it in? What kind of patients are coming here? What is the quality of care that they're getting? Are they satisfied or not? Are the doctors working in that hospital happy or not? Are the nurses properly paid or not? They are not concerned about any of these things. Sorry to say this, I'm putting it a little crudely, but this is the reality. Okay. They have only one indicator, and that indicator is maximizing the share value of that corporate hospital and maximizing the financial returns. So if they have bought the shares of that hospital for 100 rupees, within 2 years, the share value should go up to 300 rupees. This is the target. Okay. Now they put this target onto the management of this corporate hospital. And they tell them that, look, you're not making enough profits right now. So many patients come to you for OPD care, but very few of them get admitted. Not enough of them are getting operated. We have a huge MRI scanner, which is underutilized. We and so on. We have a very nice laboratory with all the most modern laboratory equipment, but not enough patients are getting investigated, and so on. We have a nice cardiac, latest cardiac catheterization unit, but not enough patients are undergoing angioplastics. I mean, you know the story. I'm not telling you something new. So, you can imagine what starts happening. And if you don't do this, you're fired, or you have to suffer consequences. And this goes down the line, right down to the frontline doctor and nurse, because all of them have to start adapting to and conforming to the logic which is flowing from the top, which is the financial logic. So the purpose of, this is, healthcare starts getting disembedded from the real, its actual nature of serving patients or treating patients or responding to the needs of patients in some form. I'm not saying that the earlier situation was very great, but suppose 30 years back, I had my own private hospital as a doctor, and I had some sort of small, medium hospital. Well, I would balance the two things. I would, of course, try to make money, no doubt. But at the same time, I had to be cognizant that if people are to come to my hospital and they have to I have to have a good reputation as a doctor. If patients need to trust me at some level, even in a commercial way, that this is a good doctor, I need to cater to their needs also to some extent. I need to, take care of the fact that I'm not hyper exploitative, and I need to have some sort of a stake in the patient recovering, in the patient getting some reasonable quality of care, and my own reputation as a doctor being, sort of preserved and enhanced. I'm not saying that this is something very ideal, but it may be a little paternalistic, but still, there was at least some sort of connect with the patients. Now, today, in the corporate hospital, each time the patient goes in, they're seeing a different doctor. There's complete, and now even doctors, you can get online consultations. Now, online consultation means that there's absolutely there's no doctor-patient relationship. It is evaporated. It's just, a financial transaction. I pay the money, you give me the consultation. I don't know whether the consultation that you're giving me is in my best interest, because next time I cannot even ask you a question. If Gayatri is treating me and I go to her and I don't get good treatment, the next time I'll go and ask her, doctor, aapne theek se ilaj nahi kiya. I have not improved. You please need to change the treatment, or you need to do something better. There's a accountability. In an online consultation, there is zero accountability. So, there are many other things. I'm not going into all the details, but broadly, financialization pulls the control and out of the, the real economy into the financialized economy, and which assumes a life of its own. It assumes the dynamics of its own. And there are many books which have been written about this, which show that the people who operate in that space, it's a different, they wield huge power. They play with money, they play with huge amounts of money, but it's not necessarily in the best interests of the real economy or people who are buying and even producing the goods and services in the real economy. And I'm including even doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers, and of course, patients. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Ashok has written something. Given today's scenario where digitalization seems inevitable, affecting even the poorest people, how effective will be the government's efforts in reducing the adverse impacts like data privacy acts, etc.? Yeah, so this is it's a good observation. And as I just briefly mentioned, even governments face a challenge. If there's no political will to regulate, then of course the situation is really bad. But even if there is some political will and desire to regulate, it is definitely challenging. It's not very straightforward, but there are ways of doing it, because ultimately all these markets are heavily shaped by state policy. We may not realize it, but whether you you allow a certain kind of financial corporation to operate in a country, whether they are allowed to, you know, buy and sell hospitals, for example. So, for example, foreign direct investment. Till the year 2000, the hospital sector in India was protected from foreign direct investment. You must be knowing this. After the year 2000, 100% FDI was involved in the hospital, was opened up in the hospital sector. So this is a government policy. We don't talk about this policy. We just talk about the free market. That led to, and so suppose tomorrow, the government says that not more than 35% FDI will be allowed in the hospital sector. I'm saying as a proposition, immediately a certain kind of financialization will be rolled back, or it will be, put on the back foot, and, more domestic resources will flow in, and, various things could happen. So, okay, I think we have dealt with one level of the linkage between digitalization and financialization. Kalai has asked, what I get is alienation at almost all levels between doctor and patient, with the healthcare professionals as to what they are working for, with hospitals and government, even with stakeholders, and for what the industry and what is being produced. So yeah, you're correct. So actually one indirect, or I will not say indirect, but one maybe inadvertent consequence is fragmentation. So everybody is operating within a certain bubble, within a certain kind of space, which has a logic of its own, but that is not necessarily integrated with what other people are doing in the same sector. So probably what you're talking about, alienation, means something similar. This fragmentation which takes place, and which is very, very detrimental in healthcare, because each actor is pursuing their own financial logic to the exclusion of the healthcare logic. So each person is saying, how do I maximize my profits, and not how is patient welfare maximized? And that leads to this kind of fragmentation. What are your thoughts about the new AI hospital? I don't know about this. Maybe Dr. Suresh, you can tell us later on.
We have missed one more question that Dr. Suresh asked. What happens to brick and mortar essential activities like healthcare if they are valued less and become unsustainable, and an economy of fake commodities, robots, AI, and assets take precedence at scale? And what are your thoughts about the new AI hospital in China, which has completely replaced human employees?
Yeah. So AI and robotics is another huge area, which perhaps I'm not sure if you'll be able to deal with that today. I'm also not very knowledgeable about this. So maybe all of us can discuss it, but I'll just tell you my brief take on this. Healthcare, by its very nature, there is a strong element of basically human provide care, which at least in the near future is unlikely to be replaced. And at least in countries like India. This is my general sort of proposition. I may be incorrect, but so all this financialization and all these digitalization processes which are going on at certain level, ultimately they depend on some hospital somewhere giving some care to some patients, at least in the present situation. Some things may be automated, some things AI may be brought in, maybe there may be robotics, maybe replacing some elements of this, but on the whole, it's unlikely that in the near future, health workers, doctors, nurses will be replaced on a very large scale. So ultimately they are required, but their role becomes subsidiary. They're controlled by certain other powerful processes. About the hospital in China, I am not aware. So maybe later on in the later discussion, we can talk about that. So I'll suggest that now maybe we go to the further part of the presentation, because there is more stuff to be talked about. So I'll just resume the presentation.
Abhay and Gayatri, just one point. I mean, I have some points which I'll mention later, but just one about the concerns I wanted to flag here, right? Yeah. So anyway, firstly, I'm really sorry for joining late. A lot of issues. I mean, my laptop is not working. I don't have it, and I was trying to join from my mobile and all. Anyway, so I'm really sorry I got very delayed. So, just quickly about the concerns, of this kind of digitalization. I mean, I'm not going to AI, but digitalization per se, you see, they definitely are a lot of concern. I speaking for India, right? Uh, um, One is at the personal level, what are the concerns they raise? Like when I was writing, I mean, when I was trying to read up to understand this that digital health mission, right? I didn't get into the use of these digital technologies at the personal level. I mean, I kept it only at the institutional level, but at the personal level, you see, privacy remains an important issue in the online consultations, right? How are you going to regulate them? Who is regulating them? I mean, Abhay mentioned about online consultations. So that is one area of concern. So personal level. And secondly, in mental health, this is being promoted. And the apps that are being developed, the personal devices are all based on apps, which are being heavily promoted among a certain class of people, right? Who is making those apps? Are the doctors able to understand those apps? And then based on that, what kind of advice will they give? How will they guide their patients? So there is this, we are probably, for one section of the population at least, there is a case where they're personally consulting the doctor, but also based on use of personal device apps, right? I need not go into that. Some of you may be facing it, some of you may be even using it. So, it may be useful to share. And mental health apps again, this is a concern which several mental health professionals have started expressing as to, who is making them, how are they being made, how do you personalize them? And a person with mental health issues, how are they going to use it? If it is it going to lead to more isolation, which is detrimental to persons with mental health problems, so there are these two very major concerns. Of course, at the institutional level also there are several problems. I'll come to that
We'll come to
later. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Indira. So those were important points. And we'll come to the institutional part and the digital health mission very soon. And there definitely you would be adding points. So now coming to the remaining presentation. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So now flowing from the whatever we have discussed until now, this is kind of a logical corollaries of that when we come to the health sector. So how is digitalization and financialization and the operation of fintech, how does it affect the health sector? And how does this linkage play out in the health sector? So we already have talked a little bit about big data. And big data is generated from digital health records. So patients, and we are talking about millions of patients. We may be even talking about hundreds of millions of patients potentially. So this big data is being generated from health records. And we now sort of, and this data it's very tightly controlled. It's not democratized data. It's actually very centralized and in a sense, almost monopolized data, which is either there with the government or maybe is shared with some big corporations who purchase it or who have some kind of agreement or arrangement with the government. And now if you know what are the morbidity patterns, what are the prescribing practices, what are the drug consumption patterns in large sections of the population across different parts of the country, for a pharmaceutical company, for a health insurance company, for a lab chain, laboratory chain, this data is very useful. It's very profitable. So then we come in with the health analytics, because basically in this financialized healthcare system, the company which has the data and which has the analytics will actually be able to capture the market better. because they know exactly what is the current situation in terms of which kinds of patients, which diseases, what kind of prescribing, what kind of drug use, etc., is going on, and also what are the risks associated with different kinds of people at different ages, in different geographies, in urban areas, in rural areas, and they can target their insurance products or other products accordingly. So probably this is one major influence of the digitalized financialization, that is in terms of use of big data and health analytics. The second, which is quite linked and which we discussed last time also, is expansion of health insurance. Insurance, as we know it today, is completely dependent on a very sophisticated digital infrastructure, because they are continuously calculating and keeping track of not only which patients are getting reimbursed and how the claims are being processed and so on, but also which patients constitute what kind of risk and what kind of risk. The whole insurance industry is actually based on a calculation and a sort of management of risk. So who needs to be charged higher premiums, who needs to be rejected, which claims need to be rejected, all this, and which need to be approved and at what level. All this is very much dependent on a sophisticated digital infrastructure, claims processing, and tracking of people over a life cycle or over many years, because you want to retain and expand your base of clients for health insurance. And of course, this digital health infrastructure. So therefore, now you start seeing this term digital health infrastructure is important. It's not just one company having data about some patients. There's a whole ecosystem where a digital health infrastructure is being created so that every patient, their health information starts getting fed into some kind of a stack or some kind of a health information database, which then can be utilized by different players, whether it is pharma companies or health insurance companies or governments. So this will help us to understand about the Aadhaar card and the National Digital Health Mission. And new revenue models also emerge because of this fusion of financialization and digitalization in the health sector. I'm not right now sort of saying whether these are entirely positive or negative. There may be some positive potential uses of some of these platforms, but telemedicine, digital health apps, electronic health records. So these create new revenue streams. So if you look at the kinds of startups which are emerging in the health sector, a lot of them deal with digital health systems and digital tools of various kinds. And these are ways of cutting down costs and increasing their profits. And digital health ecosystems also attract and facilitate global flow of capital. And as I shared last time, and Indra will also add to this, today, the big corporate hospital chains in our country all have been more or less taken over by digital capital or transnational, by global capital or transnational capital. And this is also tied to digitalization. Because capital needs to know exactly what is going on in terms of the financial flows, profits, level of profitability, and as easily as they can invest in a profitable venture, equally easily they can exit for them from that venture at a drop of a hat as soon as the profitability goes down. So financial institutions are only interested in that. So therefore they need to know very, very precisely through their digital various kinds of data flows about what is going on. And health tech startups, already I have mentioned about these, and now these include AI and health data analytics and so on. So now digital health has in fact emerged as itself a high growth sector, which is quite profitable. And financial institutions are looking on that as an emerging kind of market or a newer market. Now this financialization, digitalization also promotes public-private partnerships, and these public-private partnerships require sophisticated digital health platforms. And in fact, the entire Aadhaar-based digital health platform, I think we'll discuss this soon, and Indra will add in this, that these actually is primarily focused on management of public-private partnerships and health insurance schemes. That is actually its primary objective, whether the government says this explicitly or not. But when you have multiple, you have hundreds or perhaps thousands, in the case of PMJY, tens of thousands of healthcare providers and millions of patients, obviously you require certain kinds of digital health platforms to keep track of how payments are being made, how reimbursements are being made, and what kinds of services are being given, etc., etc. And the data which is generated through these platforms becomes a commodity, and commodification of data. I think we've already talked about that. Now, what are the impacts of this digitalization plus financialization? So this already, it's a kind of little bit of repetition, but it's reiterating the same points. So since these digital tools are driven by, you quantify something and you make the qualitative aspects to completely disappear. In a way, that is what is done by digital tools. So quality of care, patient satisfaction, rationality of care, doctor-patient relationship, trust of the patient in the doctor in the hospital, all these things become completely, they vanish. And there's only one metric, and that is the profitability, a quantitative metric, which overrides these other kinds of parameters. And therefore, now healthcare providers, this has happened with private equity in the US. There are studies which show that somewhat less profitable services are shut down or they are de-emphasized. And those which are more profitable, even if they are not necessarily the top health need of the community or of patients, those are more than prioritized. And therefore, there's a skewing of care. So essential care may get sidelined, and profitable care, profitable for the hospital, may get much more prioritized. Patient data exploitation, I think we've already briefly talked about this. And companies may sell this aggregated patient data to pharma companies, to health insurers, to tech firms who use it for their marketing and insurance pricing strategies. And of course, the overall financialization linked with digitalization leads to people also changing their perception about healthcare. So it's a financial product. X health insurance company is charging Y premium. A hospital is charging so much for the procedure, and which is so we are basically like a consumer in a very complex and not very and a pretty unequal market, and trying to somehow cope with this kind of situation. And it's all about financial transactions rather than about human well-being. In this process, as I already mentioned earlier, corporate consolidation, mergers, takeovers, and greater and greater centralization of and monopolization by capital takes place. And this is an inevitable feature of capital, that it tends to centralization. And digitalization enables this kind of greater corporate control. Those who have the most effective and most modern digital technologies, those corporates will tend to take over and dominate over others in the market, and they'll acquire smaller healthcare providers. Imagine a small or medium-sized hospital run by maybe an individual doctor or a small group of doctors or a polyclinic or something like that. They will not be able to compete in this kind of digitalized market for various reasons. And this further then becomes a kind of a vicious cycle, reducing the competition and increasing the cost for patients. So certain high-tech procedures are only available in a few hospitals, then obviously their prices can be jacked up. And then, of course, this has implications for quality of care, cost cutting, etc., etc. So now I think, Indira, you can probably, if you want, you can take over. I'm now this is entirely on the National Digital Health Mission and based on your article. So if you want, you can take over the presentation now, or if you want, I can read it out and then you can add to this.
Yes, yeah, Abhay, I think you finished this presentation. I will add to it. As I said, I don't have anything with me right now.
Okay, okay.
But I will just add to, if something is left out from your presentation, I'll add to it. As I said, I still don't have my laptop, and I've borrowed a laptop, but all the points
Yeah.
that I had made,
Okay, okay.
I mean,
So,
the
yeah, so this part of the
problem of
presentation,
depending on digital technology, if I don't have it, I don't have anything. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So,
yeah, you
yeah.
just finished this. I'm following
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Okay. So now we are coming to a very specific aspect of digitalization, and that is digitalization, which is linked with the operation of the government in the health sector, and which also has close linkages with the corporate and private healthcare sector. So this is one specific front of digitalization, which is central part of government health policy today, and that is the National Digital Health Mission. And which is closely linked with, for example, the Aadhaar cards, and so various other components of this mission, which we are probably aware of to some extent. So I'm just presenting the summary critique. I'm not describing the whole digital health mission because that would be a big exercise. This is heavily drawing upon Indira's article, which I've already shared the link for that, and I'll encourage you to read that article if you have not done so already. So this National Digital Health Mission, it basically is focused on the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which has been promoted by BMGF, World Bank, WHO. All of these are actually centrally involved in PMJAY, and also to some extent in the Digital Health Mission, and also certain business consultancies. So these these are all external agencies in different ways. DG is the German Development Finance Institution, a German developmental bank. So I think I had shared perhaps in one of my earlier presentations how the entire design of PMJY has been guided by the German, German development agencies. So they have been promoting digital health solutions of various kinds. And basically, a new kind of entire infrastructure is emerging. So we need to understand, we cannot understand the digital health mission without understanding the need for a digital health infrastructure, which is felt by various powerful private actors and corporate actors, and also international agencies. So there's a convergence of their interests. So this, they basically need to know that if the entire health system is going to be more and more configured as a kind of a large-scale public-private partnership, let us say, where the government will be giving funds, as in PMJY, the private and corporate healthcare sector will be giving services to people. Health insurance companies will be involved in processing of claims, etc. The pharma industry will also be involved in a different way in providing medicines, and all of these different actors, and they're also international finance, and will be investing through corporate chains and so on in a certain form. So they need a certain digital health infrastructure to manage this entire emerging, whatever we want to call it, this configuration. And the building of that digital health infrastructure is the National Digital Health Mission. This is maybe a bit simplified, but this is what I have broadly understood. Indira can add further to this. So we need to understand it as it's a mega project of a certain kind, which has multiple stakeholders who have their own interests involved. Interestingly, patients don't seem to be a very high priority in this entire building of this infrastructure. They probably come much lower in the priority compared to these other powerful companies and corporates. And so the Digital Health Mission is very closely aligned with corporate and private interests. And it prioritizes business and technological profits over, for example, ensuring equitable access to healthcare. So just to take a brief detour, if we wanted to effectively use digital health data in our country, probably the first priority should be looking at the HMIS data, which is generated from PHCs, from CHCs, from public hospitals, etc. And to use for the government to use this better to improve, access to healthcare, delivery of healthcare, organization and management of public health services. But that's not part of the digital health mission. That's not part of the government's priority at any level. In fact, whether and how the HMIS data is used for management of improving patient care and patients' access to healthcare is itself a question mark. So this is the kind of digital health infrastructure which is being built with the participation and strong stakes of these various, corporate and private stakeholders. And this is kind of dovetailed into a global health technology, which Indira has called the Gates approach to global health. So where it's basically said that the solution.
Just one clarification, Abhay. I mean, it's not this thing. Several others have pointed out about.
Okay.
There's been a discussion about the Gates approach. Yeah. Just clarifying.
Okay. Yeah. So, but I read it in your article, so that's why I'm quoting.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I've given the reference. There is, this whole promoting certain kinds of technology in a big way, mobile apps and all that. Yeah.
So this is a brave new world which is emerging, where technology and capital will solve all the problems of healthcare in our country. And apparently, it will sort of promote healthcare access to various sections of society. But actually, how this plays out on the ground is very different from the way in which it is probably conceptualized in the Gates Foundation or other such, global agencies. And this data, which is going to be generated, which is already starting to getting generated, will be highly centralized. The control of this is highly centralized. It's only certain specific government agencies or certain corporates who will have access to this data. So, for example, if I want to know about the quality of healthcare provided by private hospitals in my city, there's no way I can come to know about it. If I want to know about the prevalence of antibiotic usage in different hospitals and whether it is being overused or properly used, there's no way that I can get this information from NDHM as a doctor probably, or even as a public health expert, let alone an ordinary patient. So the data is very centralized. Its control is very centralized. It's not decentralized. It's not democratized. It's not available to various social stakeholders. It's only available to corporate stakeholders and the government, at least as we understand it. And this is linked with, of course, privacy concerns, which have a lot has been made about these privacy concerns, and they are definitely important. But I would say that needs to be put in a little bit of context. It's not just a middle class issue, ki mera data wo koi chura lega. I mean, of course, that it's one important concern, but the overall larger concern is that the entire digital health infrastructure is getting prioritized, much more prioritized than the actual development of the public health infrastructure. So where will people go for care, especially in the public health system, whether they will get adequate care there, whether those PHCs, those CHCs, those public hospitals are properly equipped, this completely starts going into the background. It's not talked about. It's the dog which does not bark. So that is completely sidelined, and the cart is put before the horse. And how the data which is emerging, how that will be managed and how that will be controlled it becomes much more important than actually how patients will be given care as part of the system. Of course, there's a claim that there will be portability of services and that information will be made available to various providers and so on. But it's a big question mark as to what extent that's actually going to benefit patients. And there's, of course, digital inequality and a huge digital divide, particularly between urban and rural populations, and even otherwise, that, to what extent. So now today, it's often difficult, even if I have a PMJY card and I go to a private hospital and access some care through the scheme, to know what amount is there in my so-called account, what amount is being used, how much is available, and what has it been used on. Even these kind of simple kinds of data are difficult to get for an ordinary person, and let alone navigating the whole lists of included procedures and excluded procedures, and which hospital offers which procedures under the scheme and which hospital does not. give this and so on. So there's a huge information asymmetry also which is involved in the happening. So Indira, I'll suggest that you can now add to this about the digital health mission.
Yeah, I think we'll come to the questions and comments in the chat box later. Abhay has covered some of the points from that article. Now, I think Abhay will agree with me. We clearly, I think, want to state that it's not, we don't want to be seen to be taking a kind of a Luddite position, right? That as far as technology in health goes, and even about this digitization and digitalization, right? Yes, the digitization of data and HMIS, Abhay has already referred to, and it is very useful, right? It's not that one is against digitizing the data, digitizing the records. One is not against electronic health records and its usefulness at the institutional level. But yes, I think one needs to re-emphasize that the concern is that what are the objectives here of digitalization? Even digitization itself, creating that Aadhaar is basically equivalent to, it's being seen as an electronic health register. So it's going to be kind of a unique ID, patient ID, right? So coming to, the objectives, Abhay has again, mentioned it, the objectives clearly, it's very much linked to the implementation of the PMJAY, right? A very clear, I mean, so, is all the infrastructure going to be made for just this one program? Then, what about does it mean then, how do we, what happens to the hospitals that are outside the PMJAY? Because we also know that not all establishments, not healthcare providers are empaneling under PMJAY. PMJAY is still facing a lot of problems at the ground level. I mean, these are very practical questions, how they are going to be addressed. Or will it mean that all healthcare providers have to be part of PMJAY? If it is going to cater to the insurance needs only. Another very important concern is, which who were the people involved in even coming up with this kind of a digital infrastructure? To the best of my knowledge, none of the medical professional association and healthcare providers themselves have been involved in any way. If you look at the way the program, the NDHM itself was formulated and who all were part of it, I didn't come across any healthcare groups, even medical groups, considering that doctors will have to be will be involved in using it in a very big way. In fact, I just came across some comments by IMA. IMA was probably one of the organizations that responded to the NDHM, once it was circulated. And IMA itself has expressed several concerns, right? I don't think there was enough time given for everybody to even understand what is happening. So I mean, the issue of privacy and the issue of transparency begins at that level itself. Introducing an infrastructure like this needs much more widespread discussions. Even patient groups could have been involved, doctors groups could have been involved. That does not seem to have happened. What clearly seems to be the objective is to create this unified health interface, like the UPI for financial transactions. It very clearly says one unified health interface and to monetize all the health data, right? So that one needs to be very clear. Now, why the concern about who all are involved, right? I just wish to mention here that the whole experience of technologies in medicine, medical technology itself over, almost a century now, right? If you take from 1920s onwards, technology use has only become more and more intensive. But there are very good studies available, and an important concern is that with technologies, once certain systems get set into place, once a system is put into place, certain ways of working, certain ways of organization are set up, then it becomes extremely difficult to change them or even to replace them. This is one warning that has been given about medical technology. So if we look at this kind of a digital infrastructure, if it is going to cater only to largely economic interests and insurance-based economic interests, then does that leave space then for using the HMIS, which and in fact, the experience of All India Institute of Medical Sciences with HMIS data, with the electronic health records data that they managed to generate for their outreach program, showed that it is very useful. So where is our focus going to be, and how are we going to turn the focus around to a very genuine public welfare use of health data, right? Apart from the issue of data privacy will always remain, right? That concern is very much there. Uh, and one thing which needs to be pointed out is so far, the records show that ransomware attacks on healthcare data is quite high across the world, right? In India itself, in AIIMS, the the systems just crashed, and they had to, then that was about 6 months ago or 1 year ago. So ransomware attacks where data of so many lakhs of people, if they are going to be held up, how is the government going to address it? So one is the practical difficulties at the institutional level, the practical difficulties, the issues of privacy and ethics at the personal level, and also, if this kind of an infrastructure, access to internet, we already, the kind of impoverishment that we have in the country now, right? The experience even with the use of Aadhaar to access food grain rations is quite abysmal. Now, in such a situation, if the people are going to have to cope with, having a health ID and what is it, is it going to squeeze them out further from healthcare is something, we need to pay attention to, right? So these are some of the issues. I just wish to add to what Abhay has already said. Yeah. Rest, I think when we address the questions, I'll come back to them.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Indra. And before we go ahead, I think we should spend a few minutes on the Aadhaar card. Because this is something which is the most visible and most pervasive and sort of large-scale manifestation of digitalization of healthcare in the linked with the government, linked with government policy. And so I think already quite a bit of the our apprehensions about this whole Aadhaar card project as part of the National Digital Health Mission have been reflected, but I'll just reiterate a few points. One is that there's a huge risk that it could become a mandatory requirement to access healthcare. The way in which today Aadhaar has become almost de facto mandatory requirement for many kinds of financial and other transactions. So it starts as being sort of so-called voluntary, but gradually it's pushed more and more. And then when you go to a hospital, you are asked first show your Aadhaar card. Without that, you will not, get care. You go to a government hospital, and you're also asked to first produce your Aadhaar card. And large numbers of people may not be able to, negotiate and argue and contest that. And the government will, so that's one major concern about the Aadhaar card besides the other issues. Second is that it's putting the cart before the horse. So building a digital health infrastructure without adequately strengthening the basic public health infrastructure is actually completely lopsided. So, I mean, of course, you can have a digital health infrastructure. You do need it also in a different form. But if patients are not going to get quality, adequate care from the system, and they're only asked to produce their Aadhaar cards and get Aadhaar cards made, it's actually completely reversing the priority which should be there. And the third is that it's not really the potential for health discrimination, especially by insurance companies or even employers. So if somebody's Aadhaar card reveals that they have had a past illness, serious illness, or maybe an accident, or they have some chronic illness, then employers may use that data or misuse it. Health insurance companies may misuse that information and lead to health discrimination, which the person may not even realize why they have been rejected in a particular situation. And medical surveillance and profiling is another kind of issue, which can lead to, for example, people with HIV/AIDS or certain other kinds of issues, may or mental health problems, they may be profiled, and that could even be used for, blackmailing or other kinds of problematic surveillance, and and the whole issue about consent. That even though formally it's based on informed consent, but in practice, the Aadhaar card is not really something that is, people are being given a huge option. So it may be converted into a mandatory requirement. So without providing the mandate services which the government should provide on a mandatory basis, people will be asked to produce their Aadhaar cards on a mandatory basis as a precondition for availing of healthcare in any form. And that would lead to a whole range of distortions and exclusions and problems. So Indra, if you want to add something about the Aadhaar card.
Right. See, already I think the even for to access PMJAY itself, they need to be registered. So probably, that itself could transition into the Aadhaar card. I mean, the Aadhaar anyway is some unique identity of certain digits, right? What I wanted to add was this is something now. I mean, I am not a practicing doctor. So this is something, what is happening at the ground level is something we just don't know very much, that is where doctors and we need to really do much more primary data collection, primary studies among doctors and among patients also, what their experience is, to what extent this has rolled out, because even now, again, in the implementation of PMJAY, also in several states, private consultants associated with PMGF and all are involved. Some of these consultants are also working in some of these startups that are developing that are part of this NDHM sandbox and all that, developing the necessary software. So, the concern that I find is we are just not. I mean, this is a small group that we are sitting and discussing, right? Less than 50 people, but a similar concern in the larger public health community, medical community is still not there about what is happening really, For instance, we have a Health Economics and Policy Association. Why is financialization not an issue for health economists is something that beats me really, Why the focus is only on public health budgets. This kind of financialization that is happening. It seems a bit off track for me to raise it here, but I keep finding, that the kind of it is not getting the attention that it should. NDHM and maybe anecdotal accounts that maybe some of you doctors are facing it. But how do we make it into a priority issue currently is something which we can address. Yeah. So,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point. And basically, hospitals also need to be registered under NDHM. You know,
Yes, yes,
that's also
yes,
another angle. Huh? So
yes.
why should, I mean, suppose I'm running a not-for-profit, whatever, socially oriented healthcare setup. And now all my data will be now churned into the NDHM health stack. I mean, whether, so why should I agree with such a, conditionality? And I think doctors also need to be pretty much more, analytical and critical about NDHM and its potential implications for their practice, whether they're working in a hospital which is operated by someone else, like the government or a private, whatever hospital, or they're running their own healthcare establishment. There are those range of issues. So thanks. I think SEBI has shared some link also. And I'll just add one final point: the overall complexification of life and the complexification of access to healthcare, which is taking place, where you have to jump through multiple hoops and you have to negotiate a maze of procedures and produce this card and produce that document and this gives this Aadhaar card and link that to this your bank account and this and that. So that becomes a sort of a overall a way of controlling people and hampering their collective action to demand access to healthcare, because each one is सब लोग अपनी जगह उलझे हुए हैं. Everybody is stuck in somehow producing some card or linking something or getting some document and this and that. So the scheme claims to be inclusive, the PMJY scheme, but actually if you see the nightmare which some patients have to go through to access free care through that scheme, it's itself a form of control. The complexification of access to healthcare through these health insurance type of schemes is also an issue which probably will be further compounded through the Aadhaar card and the NDHM. Okay, so I think it's already 8 o'clock. Now we had another topic for this time, but I guess we have covered quite a bit of ground which needs to be also digested. So I'll just flag the last, it's not the last slide, but it's the slide which I wanted to go into the next topic, but I think we either will discuss that some other time or we'll, see how to discuss these points later on. So this, I think, I'm not sure if I have presented this already, but how essentially the state and the corporates, their interests come together and they become fused with each other. And healthcare corporates, their accumulation depends on manipulation and modification of state policy, government policy. And welfare is replaced by certain financial instruments. So instead of people having a right to just walk up to their PHC and getting free healthcare, now there's an entire scheme. Then you go through your PMJY, you produce your card, you negotiate with the private hospital, you may or may not get some kind of fragmented and sometimes excluded kind of access to healthcare, and insurance itself becomes a form of governance. And this has an impact on public health systems. So I think maybe we can either discuss this next time or we can just shelve this and flag it as a issue to be discussed separately about how this entire, so by discussing NDHM, we have discussed one aspect of how digitalization and financialization is influencing public policy and public systems. But we can also later on come to how it is influencing the main public health system itself through hyper-centralization, through the way in which health finances within the public health system themselves are getting constricted, controlled, and in a certain way, distorted, so that, essential health services, which should be freely accessible to people at the grassroots level, are getting more and more compromised and more, it's becoming more and more difficult, at least in most states, maybe with few states being an exception to this, but in many states of India, it's really becoming a problem. And that's linked, of course, with the lopsided digitalization and overall constriction of public health financing. So just like financing's, globalized finance flowing through private and corporate channels into the entire private healthcare sector becomes the dominant reality, almost in the same measure, public health finance gets constricted and gets, more and more, becomes more and more selective, more and more conditional, and more centralized, under centralized control, so that, it's less and less able to actually deal with people's health needs on the ground as it is required. So I think we should probably stop here and not go to the next part, because that will be a topic in itself. And maybe we can have a last round of clarifications, comments, suggestions, questions, and maybe think about how to plan the next session. Would probably be linked to the implications for practice or implications for health professionals and health activists. So Gayatri, what do you suggest? How do we?
Yeah, I think we can answer some of the questions that have come up in the chat, and then we can plan for the next session.
Okay, there's a long comment by Kalai, which I can see. Dr. Ashok has also made a
Could I
comment.
read it from the last thing that was
maybe you can.
addressed?
Yeah.
Okay, so Roisin has said that at the end of the day, isn't it national policies that are encouraging or facilitating the shift in digitalization of the public health system without prioritizing the actual critical gaps in public health delivery that is affecting healthcare? And national policies are being influenced by corporate or private players for whom the public health system is not a priority. I think that's a comment. Sebin says, sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, that's, I think we all would agree with that broadly.
Sabin says, asks, BMGF's monopoly seems to be an important factor in National Digital Health Mission design and policy. How do we understand this organization's intents and objectives?
Okay. So I'll encourage all of you to read, there's a book on philanthrocapitalism. And philanthrocapitalism is a combination of philanthropy and very large scale, operation of capital. And it's BMGF is probably the best example of philanthrocapitalism. The Global Health Watch, previous Global Health Watch 6 has an entire chapter on philanthrocapitalism, and which focuses on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I think it's a big topic for those who are interested, and it's more complex than just a crude kind of manipulation. There's an entire ideology, presentation of technology as the solution to all problems in all sectors, including the health sector, very broadly speaking. Of course, technology needs to be a part of the solution. We are not against technology at all, but technology cannot be a replacement for social and political, issues which need to be resolved to improve our health systems. So I think BMGF is a topic in itself. Maybe we can.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would add to that. Yes, that's an important point. And in fact, this is not so much about nationalism, especially in the present context. But why only BMGF? If it is about digital, creating digital infrastructure, right? Then we are being told that India is supplying IT power to the rest of the world and so on. In fact, the whole IT sector in India is considered to be very strong and so on. So, why is it that's precisely what I'm saying? Why only BMGF is playing such an important role? We all know that BMGF, the Gates Foundation actually tested out a mobile health app and the use of mobile technologies through ANMs and ASHA workers in Bihar. It's all quite well studied, So are they also using this to test out their apps is a question that occurred to me, their mobile health apps. I mean, there are 2, 3 studies which said, where the Ashas and other ANMs were had to have mobile phones with those apps, and then the women who were being registered for ANC, they also needed to have mobile phones, and they had to pay. You see, they had to pay to get the messages also, and it's a very interesting study. So, what exactly was Gates Foundation doing there? They had this Ananya project in Bihar for several years. So we need to understand, but yes, BMJF for various reasons is very big. But overall, I think we also need to look at the whole thinking now about development assistance, right? How that has undergone change. So in development assistance itself globally, I mean this there is this divide of developed countries and developing countries, and the paternalism still continues, where developed countries have to keep providing technical and development assistance to the quote unquote developing countries. You see, so that still remains. Now, in that, the what should be the development assistance? That there is a shift. There are studies, discussions on that the private sector to play a very big role, right? It's very clearly stated. So there's a shift in forms of development assistance itself, and as all of us know, health has been the recipient of a lot of this kind of assistance. Even WHO has become a smaller player now, right? Now it is this philanthrocapitalism that Abhay talked about right now. In financialization, we are focusing on private equity, right? And how DFIs have played a role in it. But currently, I mean, over the past 5 years, there's this thinking now of uh, um, uh, venture philanthropy. What is that term they've called? Where the philanthropy itself, the philanthropy can take the form of an investment. So you
It's
your
called
philanthropy.
impact investment in
It's
investing.
called impact investment. No, there's this another term. I'll just tell you. There's this push towards blended finance mechanisms now, blended financing, and so there's this shift from philanthropy to investment. So you venture philanthropy, right? That's the term, venture philanthropy. In fact, Niti Aayog has a very big report on it. And OECD has reports now on venture philanthropy and blended finance. So the simple point being that the role for the private sector is only enlarging in all ways, especially in health also. Yeah. BMGF can be seen as part of that. BMGF, I think, currently is probably the biggest foundation on earth, right? And so it in the Niti Aayog reports and all, Gates Foundation plays a very big role. Yeah. So I hope that answers why BMGF is involved in MDHM. Plus also several institutions which are located in the public health schools in USA. They've also been part of all this. I mean, there are those changes that have happened which we need to understand. Some larger changes. The soft power and the ideology that is coming. It's not just BMGF, I should say. There are public health intellectuals also who think along these lines, and the importance to technology itself, which was debated in the 1970s. We need to go back to that debate. Yeah, I'll stop here.
I think we'll kind of wind up because it's already time.
It's 8:30. Yeah. Yeah.
But there are two more comments. One is from Kalai. It's a long comment, and it's partly a comment. There's also a kind of question there. And I think one of the key questions, which is an important question, is it possible to separate the knowledge production, that is new technologies, and the market economy? And it's an important question because we are definitely not against advancement of medical technology. We are very much for, both development and also improved access to technologies so that everybody can benefit from these technologies in an appropriate form. So I think one of the very important roles of this kind of a group can be to look at this intersection between healthcare technology, society, and corporatization. And how do we liberate, quote unquote, and reshape and reorient healthcare technology so that it serves people and all people in a universal manner rather than the interests of corporates. That is actually a core question which we need to probably discuss, and it should be possible because ultimately technology can also be liberating. It can also open up avenues for improving access to healthcare, even including digital technologies. So we are not, but the manner in which they're controlled and owned is and utilized is of course the problem. So I think that's an important point which deserves a separate discussion. And Sayantan has asked, is it possible in your experience how do medical professionals or even citizens?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a good question. I think next session, if possible, we should focus on the positive directions which emerge from this entire somewhat critical and maybe slightly daunting, and I will not call it pessimistic, but it's definitely a bit overwhelming what we have discussed in the first 3 sessions. But unfortunately, as I talked last time, it's a Pandora's box. Unless you open the box, see all the demons coming out, you cannot get to the gem of the hope which lies at the bottom of the box. So probably we needed to wade through this territory and at least have a sense of what is going on. All the details are not so important, but broadly, what is the big picture, the healthcare ecosystem? If we have that perspective, then we can get into with a much more well-informed and I would say a much more realistic and updated and contemporary kind of analysis of what we need to do in this kind of situation or what we can potentially do. And a large part of that is also what I will call knowledge-based action. It doesn't just mean going out on the streets and organizing people or going to villages and, organizing, people for protests. It also is, as healthcare professionals, as medical professionals, there's a large important component of knowledge-based, activism, which also we can think about. We are just making this analysis and the alternatives, accessible to large numbers of people, social activists, health activists in different parts of the country and in a wider scale also could be an important, very important contribution. So can we kind of wind up now?
Wind up, yeah, I'll agree. And I think we should keep Sayantan's question in mind. Yes, there are divisions within the medical profession, right? So yes, partially medical professionals themselves are also contributing to the this kind of a problem because again of the belief in technology itself and also how doctors see themselves as a profession, right? So they keep comparing themselves to lawyers and that needs to be grasped, right? What is the role of doctors? Are they a profession or are they part of a healing system? And and do they, not all doctors subscribe to the ideas of primary health care and universal health care, right? Not universal health coverage. So yes, the divisions within the medical professional community needs to be grasped. A lot of doctors are fascinated by technology, and in the current situation, it's the corporate sector that offers them that technology to practice, to become specialist doctors, to be star doctors, and so on, right? So that needs to be grasped, and yeah, we need to have more discussions on that. Yeah. Right.
Okay. So maybe Gayatri, we can wind up now, and maybe not right now, but there can be some discussion in the group and to plan the next session, which should be, as I've repeatedly said, focused on what can be done, what needs to be done, what potentially could be done, keeping all these aspects in mind. And we can revisit the whole impact of financialization on public health systems maybe later on. It's actually kind of something that we can, to some extent, we already know about that. But we can just go a little deeper into that maybe separately. So I hope that this session was not too too heavy, or it is a complex and difficult topic that we are trying to discuss, but at least I think the broad contours might have been sort of communicated.
I think that we've covered quite a bit again today. And as we get armed with more information, I think it's natural for some of us to be overwhelmed. And I keep saying this, that just hang on till the last session. And hopefully we will be able to figure out what we can do and how we can use, now that we are armed with this information, how do we use it in our spheres or different spheres of work and actually do something about this. And I think we all recognize that it's a complex, nuanced topic. And I think the action that will come from this will have to be considered and taken forward. Thank you so much, Abhay and Indira, for joining. And hopefully we will keep meeting again and taking this discussion forward. I will let everybody know when the next discussion is planned, and hope to see you again. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you
Thanks
all.
to all
Good
of you.
night.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.